Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to Millions Missing today. We have a full lineup of speakers that I'm really excited to share with you. And thank you for sharing all of your stories on social media all day. They have been so moving and so impactful. So, thank you so much for helping us amplify our message. So, to get us started today, we're going to have Jennifer Brea, who is the co founder and executive director of Emmy Action, start us off.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you all here today, gathering with so many old friends and comrades, and to all the people who've been participating and sharing your art and your stories today and throughout the week. Thank you so much. It's been so incredible to see the strength and beauty and creativity of our community. This is Millions Missing 2020. It's our fourth Millions Missing, and today, May 12th, is also the fifth anniversary of the founding, the launch of Emmy Action. And it's been an incredibly meaningful day to reflect on just how far our community has come, how much we've grown as a movement, as a collection of medical doctors working together to come up with new guidelines and treatments and working on medical education, and as an ever-expanding scientific community. And at the same time, these are really strange and hard times for everyone all over the world. And I think I'm both afraid for the future, and I'm also valuing in a different way my own experience and the experience of our community. I've been struck by how, even though many of us living with ME are particularly hard hit by this pandemic, with the economic losses, the treatments delayed, the home care lost, some of us living with an even deeper and more fragile isolation, as well as the if you live in a city, the constant sound of ambulances in the background, and also the uncertainty of what catching this illness, this virus, might mean for all of us on top of our existing conditions. And at the same time, suddenly the world is living, at least superficially, much the same way that many of us have lived our lives for years. And it's been strange to see how hard the adjustment has been when living life in bed, connecting on Blue Jeans and Zoom has been the way that we've built community and forged friendships and grown this movement. And I think seeing how hard it's been for people who haven't gone through what we've had to go through has made me really value the knowledge and the resilience of this community in a different way. The personal and collective tools that we've had to develop to meet these challenges, it's not something we ever would have chosen for ourselves, but there is strength there, and there is beauty there, and I want to acknowledge that today. And at the same time, with that knowledge, I think comes this sense that there's a tsunami coming as this virus sweeps the globe, and a very large proportion of our population will be affected. We know that many people will live with long-term chronic conditions, whether it's from the experience of hospitalization, the lung damage of the virus, or perhaps even people who go on and develop ME or a similar syndrome like it. And it's been really frustrating because for so many years we've been saying that we have to study this disease, not just to find treatments for ourselves, but because we know that if we don't understand what causes this, it just means that more and more people are going to keep getting sick and keep having to go through this experience. And so I feel like now more than ever, this fight that we've been engaged in, many of us for the last several years, others of us for decades, matters more than ever. We need recognition, we need research, and we need medical education. And so I guess I just want to say thank you to all of you for the work that you do, to all of the volunteers and the patients and the caregivers and the doctors and the scientists. We need you now more than ever. And I saw this graphic earlier today. It was a collection of photos of 9 patients holding up signs, and collectively they said, "We are the horror stories, the forgotten. We are Severe ME, and we will not be silenced." And I think every single person in that photo was, I mean, could not have been more than 20 years old. And I think on a personal note, what I'm feeling today is that, I joined this community 7 years ago, and I think I, for so many years, I was angry for myself and I was fighting for myself. And what I feel today is a different kind of anger and a different kind of resolve. And it's seeing all of the young people who are getting sick, and it's seeing all of the people who got sick in 2017 and 2018 and 2019, and all the people who will get sick this year. And so we gather today because we love each other and because it's a moment to say enough. We've had enough of this, and we're going to keep fighting until we get the investment that we need. And I hope, as painful as the next 2 years are going to be, and as many people as will unfortunately join this community, I am grateful that it is a space we have created, and we will welcome them with love. And I hope it will finally be a watershed moment where our societies and our communities can take ME and chronic illness seriously. So our fight matters more now than ever. And I just want to thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Jen. And I want to take just a moment to introduce our staff who has been working so hard for the past few weeks alongside volunteers to make this Millions Missing happen virtually, and also all year long, really trying to push forward in this mission. So there is Ben, Jamie, Espe, Aaron, Adrienne, Holly, and Hannah. Um, I just want to personally thank you for all of your work. I never said my name. My name is Laurie, and I'm the managing director here. And I am so proud to be a part of this team of humans. I am extremely honored to get to work with all of you. And so I want to say thank you, and I wanted to tell everyone who is watching that this group of people is always fighting alongside you and with you. And we just want to say that this is all for you, and we're sending all of our love your way and all of our support your way. So thank you very much. And next, I am very privileged to introduce JD Davids. JD is a longtime health writer and editor, organizer and strategist living with mild to moderate ME and several other chronic conditions. Is writing the Cranky Queer Guide to Chronic Illness at the Chronic Queer, and is an ME Action board member. So welcome, JD.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And as someone who's been blessed to be an HIV/AIDS research and healthcare activist for most of my life at this point, I've seen how community mobilization can change the world and bring about life-saving research, treatment, and care. I've seen how people with chronic conditions and disabilities are the true experts, and how our insights and needs are best served in partnership with medical professionals and scientists. I've seen how we need to and can thread a path between data and instinct, especially when the data itself is so scarce, to find a way to live as well as possible. But in all of this, I recognize my status as a white person in the US with race, class, geographical, health insurance, and citizenship privileges, plus the honor of spending years in ACT UP, the HIV activist group, and the groups and movements it spawned. But it's only with this considerable privilege, knowledge, access, and support, and still significant strain, that I can manage the proactive care and medical system engagement that I need to stay healthy, work, dream of a future, and advocate for myself and others in times that call us all to action. It's still a lot, and there's so much unknown. And now there's more unknown than ever and so much fear. So in the face of so much fear and unknown, it can be almost reassuring to feel like we can uncover secret conspiracies behind ME or HIV or COVID-19, because it's much harder to live with the complicated reality. The reality is that there's no central secret conspiracy in chronic illnesses. It's the vicious injustices of the medical and economic systems that underlie our suffering, and they're right out in the open. It's not a secret. Since my childhood, there's been a systematic and open effort to dismantle the meager federal safety net for human needs, including healthcare and medical needs in the United States, while sowing suspicion and distrust among people, especially white people, that our government could be anything but a force of harm and duplicity. But there's no secret that factors like poverty, lack of safe housing, mass imprisonment, and the disbelief that women and queer and trans people know what's going on with our bodies. These are core health issues, and that's no secret. And as these dynamics have worsened and healthcare remains inaccessible or uneven, we've become even more vulnerable to widespread epidemics than in the years of the emergence of HIV. The injustices of privatized for-profit healthcare, an open disregard for scientific processes by our leaders, and a distancing of research priorities from human needs have set up the conditions to ensure that our current response to ME and now the COVID-19 emergency are fragmented, insufficient, and logical only to the extent if the priority was making money for the already wealthy. So now, as the chickens come home to roost, we face a widespread health crisis with a federal government that intentionally dismantled its own pandemic preparedness and response infrastructure. It has told states they're basically on their own to combat COVID-19, similar to how many of us have been told that we're left to combat ME ourselves or told we don't have it, and that the distribution of relief resources, the few that have been eked out for actual health and human needs, should be a partisan issue. And today we fear that many thousands of people may join our ranks as if it proves true that COVID-19, like other significant viral infections, can fuel progression to chronic illness and ME. It was people living with HIV, many of whom did not survive into the era of effective treatments at the end of the last century, who taught me that data is as important as our passion, and that health is much more than a matter of disease and medicine, but also fundamental human rights. And that's how I know we can and fight for so much more when it comes to ME. Some who get ME will have knowledge and resources to cobble together support if they, like me, are financially stable, have less aggressive presentation of the disease, benefit from race or class privilege, or live in the rare location that has an ME specialist and that they can afford. But if we're to collectively survive COVID-19 and make the progress we need to treat and prevent ME, it's clear that our society needs to transform. It's a hard reality that there's no secret conspiracy that can be neatly unraveled like a tangle of yarn to set this to rights, nor a magic bullet that'll make it all better. The truth is hard but clear. We face significant challenges in coping with our own health, but our lives depend not only on naming and fighting for specific progress against ME, but on bringing about the just transitions we need in our society at large, so health justice and ME justice can become not only possible, but inevitable. We're on the path paved by generations of social movements that have been and continue to do the dogged work to ensure that millions will no longer go missing, even as we push for the specifics we need to live and thrive in our bodies. And I thank you for anything and everything you're doing in this struggle, and I'm honored to be among you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JJ. That was very powerful. Thank you. Our next speaker is Wilhelmina Jenkins. Wilhelmina Jenkins is a longtime advocate who abruptly became ill with ME/CFS in 1983, whose daughter also became ill with this disease as a high school student, and whose greatest concerns are increasing quality research and ensuring that doctors in every community have accurate information and are able to correctly diagnose ME/CFS. Wilhelmina?
Hello. My name is Wilhelmina Jenkins, and I have lived with ME/CFS for the past 37 years. Some of you may have heard me tell my story before. I tell it a lot because I do believe in the power of our stories. Before I became ill, 1983 was looking very bright. My family and I lived in Washington, D.C., my hometown, where I was working to complete my PhD in physics at Howard University. I was also working as a research physicist at the Bureau of Standards, now called the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and teaching at Howard and the University of the District of Columbia, teaching physics. I was planning a conference to be held at Howard, and I was working with a committee charged with increasing the number of minorities in physics. I was doing work that I loved, and I was happy and excited, looking forward to a long, productive career in physics. In February of 1983, all that I was doing came to a screeching halt. I was suddenly so exhausted that I could barely get out of bed. My legs were so painful that all I could do was cry. I couldn't sleep at night, and I couldn't wake up in the morning. Attempting to attend my regular exercise class left me crumpled against a wall. All of these baffling symptoms and the many, many more symptoms were terrible. But the worst, the absolute worst symptom was the cognitive disruption that robbed me of my ability to understand math and physics, even my own work. One of my most painful memories is sitting at my own desk, my own notebooks filled with my own work in my own handwriting, and thinking I have no idea what any of this means. I had never once considered that the math and science that I loved for my whole life could become meaningless to me. I was terrified. My doctors were kind, but they had no idea what was wrong with me or how to help me. I tried everything that I could imagine, but I kept sliding more deeply into illness. By the time that my family moved to Atlanta in 1987, I was essentially housebound and depended on my husband for my daily care. But in Atlanta, I found a doctor who asked me, "Have you ever heard of chronic fatigue syndrome?" That name sounded so trivial, but as I read about it, I found stories of crushed lives that sounded very much like mine. My doctor connected me with a support group where I discovered a whole community in Atlanta and nationwide with stories that matched my own. I also found out, unfortunately, that there was no cure or even a good treatment for my disease. This was heartbreaking to me, but far worse was the day when my precious, energetic teenage daughter came home and collapsed on our couch. I tried to deny it, but I had to face the truth. She had the same horrific disease that I had. My daughter was sick and I had witnessed an attitude by our government. The first time that I spoke publicly was in 1992 at CDC with the encouragement of my dear support group friends, calling out CDC for refusing to acknowledge that African Americans like my daughter and me could be affected by this disease. In subsequent years, I spoke out wherever I could, from CDC to NIH, from a small local radio station to the Oprah show, from a classroom at a nearby college to the halls of Congress. Advocacy work was not easy in those days of snail mail and telephone calls, but the commitment of my fellow advocates was inspiring. In spite of decades of efforts by innumerable advocates, painfully little progress has been made in the understanding and treatment of our disease, now known as ME/CFS or just ME. The quality of research being done is much higher than in the past, but the quantity is insufficient for real progress. Accurate information about the disease has still not reached the majority of clinicians in this country, making diagnosis and care difficult to obtain, especially in underserved communities. Obtaining equity for those of us living with ME/CFS has been a long battle, but at the age of 70, I'm proud to still be in the fight. I am happy to be part of the ME Action community, and most particularly to have the support and companionship of my friends here in ME Action, Georgia. The dreams that I had back in 1983 died long ago, but working together, we can reach a day where this disease will not steal another dream, another life. For us, the million missing, this struggle continues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wilhelmina. And I do want to add that Wilhelmina has been a constant advocate with us, and we have relied on her so many times for her expertise and thoughts. And we just cannot thank you enough for being a part of our community. Next up, I want to introduce my amazing coworker, who is the Director of Scientific and Medical Outreach at ME Action and a research consultant at the Stanford Genome Technology Center. She's a person with ME and the daughter and sister of a person with ME.
Everyone. I want to start off with some facts about ME for those of us who may not be as familiar with the disease. First, up to 80% of ME is post-infectious, and 25% of people with ME are housebound or bedbound. Around 13% of us can work full-time. ME also has the worst quality of life to any disease to which it has been compared, including multiple sclerosis, end-stage renal failure, and many kinds of cancer. It is highly prevalent, and it's funded inexcusably low by our healthcare institutions, CDC and NIH. Last year, I spoke about my mother and my sister with ME, about growing up in a household of a person with ME and looking after my mother. I remember that I used to come down the stairs and find her asleep on the couch and ask her why, and it took me to adulthood and having this disease myself before I realized that she couldn't make it up the stairs on her own without help and did not want to have to ask. And as I let you guys know, last year my sister passed away. And last year my niece, her daughter, let me know for the first time that she was also having symptoms. She said she's getting tireder than her peers, and she's unable to carry out her usual tasks. This year I reconnected with an old friend, my best friend from childhood. I've known this girl since I was 5 years old. Hi, if you're watching. And she warned me that she had a new disease, a new diagnosis, and when she stood up, her heart pounded like crazy, and I said POTS. And then she described post-exertional malaise. She'd also just received a diagnosis of ME. She brought back a lot of memories for me about being severely ill and about how desperate and alone and overwhelming it can feel. I've run the risk of going numb. ME has taken the women I love. And I'm left wondering, where do we go from here? We cannot stop fighting for good science. We cannot stop working for a treatment. Now more than ever, we need to step towards the light of scientific research and understanding together. I was thinking about the first Millions Missing. I was basically mission control. I was not present at any of the on-site demonstrations that first year. The first time I saw everybody in the real world, it was absolutely overwhelming. I couldn't believe that all of these people that I'd worked so hard with for so long were in front of me. I remember I said to Jen, I pictured you taller. But this kind of connection matters too. And this kind of connection is what's at the heart of Millions Missing. This is how we found each other, after all, online, together, Science matters now more than ever. In this time of uncertainty and fear, what we have is this online connection to each other. We have our care for each other. We have our love for each other. We have our understanding for and of each other at our best and at our worst. And we desperately don't want what happened to us to happen to anybody else. We cannot let another generation be lost to ME. All the potential post-COVID cases, it's for them as well that we really need to fight harder than we have ever fought before. ME has taken the women I love. I want to close out by thanking everyone so much for all that you do every day to advance science in this disease, clinical care, and all you do every day to reach out to people who are getting sick, who may not understand that the best choices are rest and recuperation and supportive care. And thank you for embracing me. Thank you for embracing all the new people who are coming into our community.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Next, I want to introduce Whitney. Whitney is a recovering perfectionist and overachiever living with moderate ME, hailing from Maryland, where she proudly displays her state flag on anything and everything. I'd also like to add Whitney's done enormous things for us this year. She's done enormous things, putting her body on the line and being a phenomenal activist and jumping right in. So I just want to say a special shout out to Whitney, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm Whitney. I'm from Maryland, about 30 minutes outside DC, and this is my first Millions Missing. So I was really hoping to get to see and meet a lot of you in person today, but I am happier this way that a lot more of us will get to participate virtually. I was just diagnosed with ME in February of 2019 when my symptoms progressed to moderate. I'm one of those people who got ME after a viral infection. This time last year, I had just gotten home from a dream vacation to Greece with my husband. We went to Athens and the Greek islands. My symptoms were progressing, but I kept pushing through and thinking, just get to May, you'll relax in Greece, you'll come home refreshed. But that didn't happen. I had an amazing time, but it was obvious that my body couldn't do the things that it used to do. The second night there, when we went to Santorini, I slept for 14 hours straight, and as usual, did not wake up feeling refreshed. We stayed in this amazing hotel on a cliffside where we didn't really belong. I used credit card points because we could not have afforded that room rate. It was amazing, but I couldn't really handle the walk from the hotel back up to the road. I pushed through the pain and the fatigue, but once I made it back to the room, there was no going back out. We didn't make any specific plans for the trip, and I just wanted to do nothing, eat good food, and relax, so that's what we did. But I came home even more tired than before, and I was crashing even harder. Back in February of last year, when I was diagnosed with ME/CFS, it was after a barrage of tests that showed no results, and my doctor said, chronic fatigue syndrome is a diagnosis of exclusion. I saw ME/CFS in my chart, but I didn't know what ME was or what it meant. When I was finally diagnosed, I found some advocacy accounts on Twitter and followed them, not knowing that this would be my lifeline. When I got home from that trip last May, it was Millions Missing Week, and I saw all of the tweets, the photos, the stories, and I knew I wasn't alone. I saw my story mirrored by so many people around the globe, and I was captivated. Now I know a lot more about ME, and I filled in the gaps in my medical history. I traced it back to the fall of 2009 when I was in college and got the swine flu. I remember only missing a few days of class and work before my fever broke and the ache subsided, but I never regained full functionality and I never woke up feeling refreshed again. I got a virus and I never recovered. I sought a diagnosis for 9 years. I thought it was my thyroid for a long time, and when the medicine didn't treat my symptoms, I tried every suggestion, going gluten-free, doing different diets, exercises, cleanses. None of it worked because I had ME. My symptoms continued to worsen through the years. I suffered after mold exposure in an apartment and took another major downturn after a traumatic ankle injury and surgery in 2017. I bounced around from specialist to specialist for all of the varying symptoms that I now know are part of ME, each trying to treat the individual symptoms or misdiagnosing me. One even suggested conversion disorder when the true culprit was reactivated Epstein-Barr virus, a path that's far too common for people with ME. I feel like I need to package up my story into a nice little fairy tale with a happy ending and a cure, but those kinds of stories aren't what inspires me. Your stories inspire me. Your resilience, persistence, strength, and perseverance. Everyone who's sharing their stories. You never know who's going to see your post and what it's going to mean to them. Your post last year saved me. I stopped my downward spiral, I learned pacing, and I found support. I'm glad that I stopped the progression of this disease while I remained moderately ill, but I could have been a mild case if I had been properly diagnosed and treated sooner. Earlier this year, I finally felt like I had gained some stability with my health and figured out helpful ways for managing symptoms, and then COVID happened. This is a stressful and scary time for all of us. I'm afraid of everything that's unknown with COVID and everything that's unknown about ME. I'm in a flare again, and it's really hard, but now I have support. This community is so warm and welcoming, even when so many of us are isolated in dark rooms and lying in our beds. The mutual aid that's provided here is incredible. Excuse me. You all are amazing. You're strong and courageous, and I'm so proud of you and thankful for all of you. When I had no idea what was happening to me, and words sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher, I lost the capacity to read and learn. You knew what was happening to me. You showed me that I wasn't alone, and you got me through it. Yes, I'm afraid that next year there will be millions more joining us after COVID infections, but I know that we've got their backs, even though they may not know it yet. Thank you to all of the people with ME, caregivers, our allies, and the researchers who participate in Millions Missing. And thanks to all of the staff and volunteers with ME Action for bringing us all together. You all give me so much hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Whitney, for sharing that. Our next two speakers they don't need much of an introduction. You all know them well in our community. Dr. Ron Davis and Janet Defoe are caregivers to their son, Whitney, and they are longtime ME research advocates. Dr. Ron Davis is director of Stanford Genome Technology Center at Stanford University.
Thank you.
That's not him.
That's not me. I've been focusing on conducting research into this disease and also trying to get other people to initiate research.
This is weird because somebody else's picture is up there.
Oh,
Okay, all right.
I think the rest of us can see you. Yeah, I think you're all right. Thank you.
Okay. It's very important to do the research because it will give us a molecular understanding of the disease. And the hope is by having a detailed understanding of what's going on in the body, and there's a lot that goes on in the body, we will come up with ideas that will lead to a treatment. a lot of the efforts to treat this disease have been mostly trial and error, and mostly error. And I think we can do a lot better if we had an understanding of the disease. My hope, and I'm really heavily focused on this, I would like to try to figure out how to cure the disease. In order to cure it, I think we have to find the primary cause and not just some of the symptoms. And so that's our biggest deep dive into the molecular underpinnings of this disease. So we have a program that looks at trying to figure out a good diagnostic, as well as using the molecular understanding to develop treatments. We are starting to do some clinical trials now of some possibilities. Those are underway. They've been held up a little bit because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'd also then, of course, like to get a cure and also possibly a prevention. So one of the things we did discover was that there is a potential diagnostic, and that is using something called a nanoneedle, which is an electronic device that looks at the electronic behavior of cells under stress. And that has worked in over 50 patients, all show that signal. None of the patients fail to show it, and no healthy controls show the signal. So it's a very good measure. Whether other diseases will show that, we don't yet know, and that's actually a very difficult thing to do because there's a lot of diseases. The next phase of that project is to scale it up so that we can do lots of simultaneous tests. And that requires changing the electronics. The electronics that we're using as a commercial device is totally insufficient for what we need to do. And so we have to make a new device that can do 100 samples at a time. That circuit has been designed by Rahim, who is the original founder of this methodology. He sent a design for fabrication, one to China and one to a US lab. Unfortunately, both of those labs are either way behind because of the pandemic, or they're closed down. So hopefully we will get that when things open up a bit, either in China or the US. And that will be the next phase where we can do a lot more testing. And we want to use that to try to see if we can find drugs that will alter the nanoneedle assay. We also have been looking very deeply into genetics as well as metabolomics, because those give us a big picture of what's going on in the body. It's hard to do human because we can't go in and sample any tissue we want. I mean, we'd love to have some brain samples, but I have no volunteers. And so we have to take what cells we can get without being invasive in the patient. So to solve that problem, we are now taking blood cells from patients, which is non-invasive, and converting them to other cell types. And hopefully that will give us a ability to do research on other types of cells, including brain cells. So the genetics has pointed us in the direction that it may involve the tryptophan metabolism to kynurenine. And that's because all of the patients, we've done about 77 patients with genetic analysis, all have a mutation in a gene called IDO2. That's unusual. And that suggests that pathway probably is involved somehow in this disease. And so we've come up with a hypothesis called the metabolic trap. And what we're trying to do now is to test that trap. We initially started out using cells from patients. That was very difficult because we could get only a few cells. And so the signals were very low, and we couldn't be sure of the results. So we've switched now to doing cultured cells. Those take a long time to do all this conversion and make different cell types, but it now gives us an abundant amount of material. Also, because we have a lot more material, we don't have to use a very expensive mass spectrometer, which is very difficult to access because everybody wants to use it. And we can simply use something called an HPLC column, which we have an expert in that field, and we can do a run every day. So that will speed up things as soon as we get the cells. Um, we have other models that we would like to follow, and the other important issue is the fact that this COVID-19 pandemic is an opportunity to actually see patients that have come down with a viral infection convert to ME/CFS. And I suspect that many of the patients that have had this disease will do that conversion. And so we've set up a collaboration with our other collaborative research centers supported by the Open Medicine Foundation to conduct a collaborative effort throughout the world to collect samples and look at them as they do the conversion. And this will be a very deep dive. So there's been a project initiated here at Stanford with many, many faculty members interested in COVID-19. This is a great opportunity to also teach them about ME/CFS. So we're going to do this collaboratively where all the data is shared. Even some of the local companies have pitched in and said they will do their analysis for free. And so this will be a very, very large data collection looking at the COVID-19 infection and then following that and seeing if patients actually convert. And if we can see what happens in that conversion, we might be able to tell when did they convert. I suspect it's actually going to be very early in the infection. If we can understand what that conversion is, we might be able to prevent the conversion. And so that would be a very important thing to be able to do to prevent other people from coming down with this disease. The other advantage of this is there's a lot of public awareness of COVID-19. And this will put ME/CFS, I think, in the spotlight with a lot of people being more understanding of this disease. So this is what our activity is at the moment. The labs are still shut down. We've been working on grants and papers and planning and those kind of things that we can do. I spend almost all my day on video conferencing with people all over the world. And trying to make progress when we are stuck at home. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's so inspiring. And Janet?
Hi. Hi. Oh, somebody else is up there now. I wanted to talk to you about basically what my day is like. So most of my day was at home and having lost most of the rest of my life because of taking care of Whitney. So this sheltering in place hasn't really changed that much for me, except not being able to go out to dinner and concerts every once in a while, but that's okay. But I'm there with Whitney, taking care of him and seeing him and changing his bandage and seeing him lie there not being able to eat and not being able to move and having not being able to talk and being in pain and having his stomach hurt every single day and being aware of his suffering. And I want to say his words about his suffering. CFS, this is Whitney's words in a recent Facebook post that he pantomimed out. CFS is an extremely devastating illness that takes and takes and takes until there is nothing left but flesh and bone. I've lost my friends, my career, my hobbies, everything that brought meaning to my life, and all sense of humanity. So I also, part of my day is spent connecting with other patients across the world, and I'd really like to just give a shout out to all of you that I know from my various ways of communicating with you. And after seeing Whitney's suffering, it expands to the sufferings of tens and hundreds of thousands of people that I'm connected with on the internet. And I try to spend a good part of each day with either phone calls or some kind of connection to patients and keeping them connected and just being a witness to their suffering and try to support them however I can. So I talk with Jameson Hill, with Veronica, with Tom Kamenson's parents, Ben Howell in England, Jameson Hill, and Neil Vanderzee, and thousands of other patients. And that is just so heart-wrenching, to know that what I see in my own son is being amplified thousands and thousands of times across the world. Uh, then at the end of the day, well, it used to be the end of the day, but all day I see Ron on Zoom meetings now since he's home. But at the end of the day, I hear what he's been doing and his ideas, and I hear all his ideas for projects. He talks about a few of them, but he has many more interesting projects that could lead somewhere and things that he wants to do to expand his current projects. And I'm so impatient with how slow this is going. And I say, well, why aren't you doing that? And including studying mold and other things. And the answer always comes down to I don't have enough money. I would have to hire another person. I don't have enough money. So the fact that he's been able to do some of this is because of patients who've donated, and the Open Medicine Foundation, and the dedication of Linda Tannenbaum and all her staff, raising money, and also people who've donated straight to Ron. And for that, I'm so grateful. So I see him with all these ideas. Then I see him writing grants. He spends a lot of time writing grants, and he's written probably at least 10 grants in this time, and one of them was funded. The rest of them get turned down for what I consider the dumbest of reasons. Basically, what happens is that the reviewers basically are lacking in critical understanding, and they are very nitpicky about small things that don't matter. So their reviews of the grants don't make any sense. Most of the time they're wrong. They're scientifically wrong. Recently, one of them, this was not an NIH grant, but it was one of the grants from NSF, where they said that why do we need to have a diagnostic if there's no cure, which was the ultimate of weirdness. So I think that Francis Collins and Koreschetz, who get on phone calls and wherever they go and say that they want to fund the disease, but they have no good grants, have the perfect cover for themselves. So they may say that they're the Institute of Hope and they want to fund good grants, but they've set up a review system that by definition never produces good grants. And I know that there are good grants being sent in to NIH that are not getting funded. So it makes me crazy when I hear them talking about wanting to fund good grants, because they have good grants. So now I just wanted to say, from Whitney says, every single person in the world should be terrified at the prospect of getting ME/CFS. No one who gets the coronavirus is safe. And he talked in that recent email about the study that Ron and his colleagues are setting up to try to study the conversion of ME/CFS of coronavirus to ME/CFS, and hopefully they'll be able to get the money to do that in a good way. And now, just to end, Whitney's latest Facebook post, he said, "Rather than write anything today, I'm going to dedicate this song to Francis Collins. Francis, I hope you're not too busy ignoring ME/CFS to listen to this song that I have thoughtfully chosen just for you." Here's some of the words. "They're walking around, head full of sound, acting like we don't exist. They walk in the room and stare right through you, talking like we don't exist. But we exist. Just let us through. Just let us through. They're down on their knees, begging us, please, praying that we don't exist. Daddy, it's fine. I'm used to 'em now, but tell me why they treat me like this." Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to you both. I hope you can convey to Whitney how much he has inspired others, and your work has inspired others, your research and your amazing advocacy, Janet. So thank you. Thank you both so very much for being here today. We are now going to be gifted with a song in between speakers. I am very happy to introduce Isaiah Small. Isaiah Small loves to incorporate all music
They're calling
genres.
you.
Oh,
Right.
hi, Rebecca. Rebecca's son Isaiah loves to incorporate all music genres to create a therapeutic sound. His mother, Rebecca Foster, has had Emmy for almost 5 years, and he hopes our efforts today will help get the word out. And a special shout out and thank you to the amazing music video that was already put together. That is on all of our social media platforms. If you haven't seen it, we'll be circulating it again. Isaiah, let me know if you're ready.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Okay, so that computer's off now, and now we're good, right?
Perfect. Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. I want to just share some therapeutic music. My mom likes to listen to it just at night, and I think get us through these tough times. Just in general, we've just been stuck at the house, and I think it's a nice activity to really get us all together. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Oh, I think I'm having trouble with your audio. I'm not sure if anyone else is.
Hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, we heard your music
Okay.
wonderfully.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that one's just dedicated.
Oh, I'm not sure. I think I'm having a tough time again.
Well, that one's dedicated to everyone else.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Have a good one, and thank you to your mom Rebecca as well. All right, everyone. It was so lovely to have some beautiful music. Um, so now we're going to go to Rob, someone I've had the pleasure of working with recently. He is a corporate regulatory insurance lawyer and former general counsel, practicing 34 years with degrees from Stanford and the University of Santa Clara, who in his spare time is devoting his energy to activism since a loved one was diagnosed with ME. Rob?
Lori, hi, thanks. Hi, I'm Rob. I'm a caregiver and an ME Action USA volunteer activist. Last year, I attended my first Millions Missing protest and was inspired to become an activist with ME Action. I hope many of you watching today, especially caregivers and allies, will similarly be inspired to join us. Here's my story. And by the way, if I get a bit choked up, teary-eyed, please bear with me. This is a very emotional topic for me. 3 years ago, a loved one of mine lost her life but didn't die. Within 3 months of falling ill, my loved one, despite her brain fog and post-exertional malaise, identified all her symptoms as ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis. At that time, we didn't know what that was, but she searched the internet and said, this is it. Of course, getting an ME diagnosis from a doctor was a different story. After about 1.5 years of doctor after doctor seeking a diagnosis or treatment, finally my loved one found an ME specialist at the Stanford CFS clinic who gave her a written ME diagnosis. It was a scary time. As the ME community knows, at present there's no cure. There's no real treatment that works, and it's usually a life sentence. Many in the public, and even in the medical community, still think it's all in their head, and this needs to change. So what's our life like? My loved one has been in the house for 3 years, only leaving for doctor visits, which are hard and painful. The windows are covered due to light sensitivity. We cannot have music anymore, sound sensitivity. She cannot stand up while showering. She was a hardcore athlete, and now she's a waif as her muscles atrophy. Compared to many people with ME, she's lucky because so far she can walk from her bedroom and sit in the sofa and sit there all day, watch TV, interact with us some. And like everyone nowadays, we're sheltering in place due to COVID, but shelter in place makes little difference in our lives. But my loved one's life is so much harder than just being stuck at home. All her friends abandoned her, thinking she had just burned out and needed rest. Fortunately, she has her family. Fortunately, we're not in financial distress right now. Hard as it is for us, though, many people with ME have it much harder. So we are among the millions missing. All I can do to help our loved one and all people with ME is activism. The public does not see people with ME. We have to grab their attention. We can't let the public, the government, the institutions, the researchers ignore people with ME. As a caregiver, I do important tasks, helping my loved one with the daily necessities to sustain life with ME, hopefully helping her find glimmers of happiness and hope in a dark, silent world of pain, but still just be part of the millions missing. As an activist caregiver, I can be in the fight, making noise, so the public, the government, the institutions, the researchers can't ignore people with ME. Sharing on social media to open the curtains and show the world the devastation of ME and how important it is to find a cure. Using my energy, which my loved one does not have, to bring about change. Doing everything in my power to help my loved one and the millions no longer be missing. If we don't do it, no one else will. Join us. Join me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for speaking today. Next, I want to introduce Omar. Most of you know Omar from the film Unrest as Jennifer Brea's husband, but he is also an assistant professor in the Department of Politics at Princeton. He received a PhD in African American Studies, an MA in Government, and an MA in Statistics from Harvard University. Previously, he co-founded BlackPlanet.com and the Brooklyn Excelsior Charter School. Omar?
Hi, can you hear and see me? No. Let's see. Am I visible?
Yeah, you're great
Okay.
now.
Thank you. So as Lori just said, probably my prime claim to fame here is I'm Jen's partner in crime. But I also, I have another life, and I study protests and protest movements. And one of the things that I think can be weird about a day like today is that you might wonder, like, why do we do Millions Missing? Why do we come together? Why even have protest? And we've heard such moving comments from other folks about how ME action has helped to give people community and how online communities have brought people together. But I wanted to sort of try and drill in a little on this question of like, why organize Millions Missing, right? And as Rob just said, one of the things we get from organizing, one of the things we get from protests, and this is one of the things I see in my research on protest movements in the 1960s, is that when people get together and mobilize, they can do what I call agenda seeding, right? We get our stories in the media, and that can amplify our voices dramatically. So if you do a Google search for ME action in the news, you'll see over the last 4 years, they're literally, it's like over 100 articles. Those are reaching audiences of tens of thousands. So we're reaching millions of people by getting out here and mobilizing. And that influence on the media has downstream effects that really matter, right? So you can think of it as a kind of squeaky wheel theory of politics where policymakers pay attention to what's in the news. We saw that in the 1960s with the civil rights movement. We saw it with ACT UP and activists fighting for recognition around HIV and AIDS, and we're seeing it now with ME Action. And it's not that any one thing we do tips the needle, but cumulatively, all of the work we do, the building ME, building Millions Missing events, the global nature of it, the sort of victories in different countries have a contagion effect in a good way, where policymakers are, seeing what other countries are doing and saying, oh, well, we need to do better too. So agenda seeding influences policy. And so we are shifting the policy world through our activism. And that really does matter over time. Another thing that I think we see in the 1960s in protest movements, we saw again with ACT UP, is culture shifting. And that activism, events like Millions Missing, the kind of ongoing sharing of stories online, it really does make a difference. People respond to personal stories very powerfully. There are a lot of people who aren't invested in the wrong narrative of this illness, which is that it's all in people's heads. They when they hear your story, when they hear about how people are suffering, their hearts open up and their minds follow. And so we can shift culture through our activism. We can shift the larger narratives about this illness by showing that the way culture, the way media, the way we have been represented over the last 50 years has been a profound misrepresentation. And so our activism is culture shifting, not just rule shifting in the way that it moves policy. And that if we can move culture, that also has effects on things like science and medicine and law. And so the kinds of activism we do that says, no, this is who we are. This is what the illness is really like. This is how devastating this illness has been on us and our loved ones. That moves the culture, and by moving the culture, we move society. One other way that activism really can make a difference is, and this is, again, a number of people have spoken to this already, but I think it's really important to underline, is that by engaging in activism, we transform ourselves. And that one of the most powerful ways in which we are changing the world is by showing that we are no longer going to stand up for the kind of disregard and dereliction of duty that has been happening in governments around the world around this illness, right? And but part of that transformation is that we go from being sort of people who feel maybe alone, or people who feel like we have no way to make a change in the world, to feeling like we actually have a voice, we have agency, we can do things, and when we come together, we can make change. And that transformation happens when, collectively. It's a transformation that happens by seeing other people find their voice. It's a transformation that happens by us being able to be heard by policymakers. But fundamentally, it's something we give to each other, and it's something that we build on year after year. And so that transformation from us being an object of bad policy to being agents of our own success is a really powerful transformation. And so just to wrap, I wanted to build on a tweet I saw a couple of days ago about COVID, where the author said, in February, a death from COVID-19 in February, you could call that a natural disaster. But a death from COVID in May is a policy disaster. And I think what we really want to emphasize, and in the case of ME, is that maybe, somebody suffering desperately in 1970, maybe we could think of that as a natural disaster. But today it's a policy disaster. It is not a mystery. We know enough to know that this is a real devastating illness for which science and research funding are merited, and the failure of our policymakers, our science research funding organizations to support finding a cure is a policy failure. We are not just the victims of bad luck. We are people who have been subject to systematic discrimination by policymakers, and what Millions Missing is about, for me, is about us coming together to say that we no longer accept that. We are going to fight for better policy, and if you don't change the policy, we're going to keep coming back day after day, year after year. And so it's really about shifting from how we tell the story about this illness, from one of, I had something terrible happen to me, which is absolutely true and absolutely real, and we need to sit with and support each other in, but also to channel that into, and there's a second catastrophe, which is the way in which people with this illness have been entirely written off by science and medicine and policy, and we no longer stand for that. Thank you.
Amazing, Omar. Thank you so much. It's incredibly motivating and so right. And I think all the more reason why today all of those stories matter, all of that awareness raising matters, because there is a bigger fight. Thank you, Omar. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Nancy Klimas, who has more than 30 years of experience and has achieved international recognition for her research and clinical efforts in multi-symptoms disorders, including ME. Dr. Klimas?
She's muted.
Oh, you are muted, Dr. Klimas. Oh, you're not.
Dr. Klimas, I would exit and come back in is what I would do. We can if you leave BlueJeans and come back in, I think is the best thing to do.
Okay, and as she's doing that, Dr. Klimas will skip to the next speaker and then come back, and then hopefully when you're back, the sound will be working. So Ashanti, I see that you just joined, which is perfect. Yes, Ben?
Sure, we can go to Ashanti or the video.
Okay, great. Ashanti, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and have you speak. Ashanti is a former registered nurse and fitness enthusiast who was thrust into the world of ME activism following her disabling sudden onset of ME nearly 4 years ago. Ashanti, are you with us? We may be having some technical problems on that side too. We'll also come back to Ashanti. But Ben, maybe this is a great time to play. We have a thank you video
Yeah,
for all of our volunteers and all of our amazing activists over the years.
I'm super excited to share this. So this is really, you guys are in for a treat. All right, hold on a second. We will start.
Thank you for sharing that, Ben. And thank you to all of you. I do believe that Dr. Klimas, have you managed to join us via telephone?
I think I have to. Yeah, hang on a sec. Let me turn this off. It's so much fun. All right, try that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's much clearer. Perfect.
Great, thank you. I just had to turn the computer off. Tricky. So tricky. Anyway, here we all are together. And I think it's wonderful that you pulled this virtual day together. It's a great thing to do. I've really enjoyed listening to your stories, and I can feel your passion. And I, of course, I started doing this in 1985, I think, so I have quite a few years of a lot of people's experience in my world. I like listening to Ron and his wife talking about the importance of doing this science. It's really very important. And this COVID thing has become a very important question. And not just, of course, what it's going to do to people who already have ME/CFS, but are we going to have the second wave, a huge wave of ME/CFS as a result of a pandemic that affects the brain? I mean, we should. The bottom line is, yeah, that's going to happen. And we know it's already happening because there's already been, social media groups starting to develop around a failure to recover from COVID from the early cases in January and February. So We have this tiny little window of early intervention that we could be trying to do something in before these people get into the decades-long stories that we're hearing today from all y'all's personal experiences. So I feel like there's this fantastically urgent moment to jump in and do these studies of potential interventions in people with COVID-induced ME/CFS symptoms as early as we can do intervention. So the good news is, despite the crappy funding, despite years of getting kicked around the block, despite all of that, we actually have learned a vast amount about this illness just by perseverance and smoke and mirrors funding. So, so what do we know? We know that the antiviral defenses are lousy. We know that inflammation kicks on it with a drop of a hat, that it doesn't take anything, even just an autonomic signal to drive, adrenaline, meaning stress even, can drive inflammation. We know that the homeostatic networks of everything, the endocrine system, autonomics, immune, are all connected, and that there's a chronic sick state in ME/CFS that causes it to persist and makes it very difficult to escape. You all have been watching our group research. We have been able to take that homeostatic networking stuff that we do through virtual clinical trial into clinical trial. And Gulf War illness, we're already starting our second phase 1 study using this kind of methodology. And we were just starting our first subject for ME/CFS when we got a COVID hold. But we will, as soon as they allow us to start, we have donation-based funding that's letting us start our first phase 1 study in postmenopausal women and men. And we're fundraising to get the premenopausal women cohort funded. And of course, we're writing grants, much like Ron's experience. You think you wrote a genius grant, and generally the ideas are genius, and the reviewers find something, usually, obviously, not the thing you thought was important, or you would have fixed it before you put it in. But somebody with some expertise on the panel will say, you didn't pay attention to what I know all about. So that's sort of the nature of the review process. You just have to keep going back and back and back again. Now, good news, thanks to the NINDS adopting us, they have fixed some policy problems. And for the first time, clinical trials are going to our special emphasis panel, which is so encouraging. I have put in umpteen zillion clinical trials over 20 years, and they always come back with, you're competing against, say, lupus or something, and the reviewers are rheumatologists, and you just they don't even believe the illness is real still. So now we'll go to SEP, which is fantastic, and perhaps we will get some at least knowledgeable, at least in part knowledgeable, we hope, depending on who gets picked, reviews of these trials. So I'm encouraged. You can expect our group to be just starting to slamming in phase 1, and then hopefully the phase 2 studies in through the trials networking. Through the clinical trials RO1 mechanisms. So that's one thing that's good news, is that NINDS has been fixing some institutional problems that have been long-standing, and of course the centers were encouraging. But of course, we still need to and have to put in lots and lots of grants to try to get some grants to trickle out the other end. And the review panels are reviewing 4, 5, 6 grants max every cycle. It's really kind of pitiful. And that's because we're discouraged. People haven't been getting funded, so they just get discouraged and don't put it in. All of your advocacy with the DOD was fantastic. You got us in on that big glop of money that goes to about 60 different diseases this year. It is a perfect first step to ask for a set-aside pot of your very, very own. Now, one of the things that has happened is the DOD got a fantastic amount of COVID money. So you can put into DOD now this type of COVID type of studies. And honestly, the DoD panels include advocates. And so they get heard better, I think, than the NIH reviews because the advocate voice is often the chair of the panels. So I would strongly encourage you to get the word out that this DoD money for COVID is a flash in the pan. It's going to be, the letters of intent are due right away. But there's a lot of that money, a whole lot of that money, and we can go after some of that money. And it makes good sense that we should. So it's a little window of time. And the other thing I think is encouraging for the MECFS community from COVID, and some of you remarked on this, is we're allowed to do telehealth now. We were not. So those of you that have been too sick to get into clinic are now allowed to be seen by doctors, and the doctors are allowed to charge your insurance company for that visit. You don't have to pay the big bucks for that. And so you're going to be seeing, as our group is trying to do right now, in new ways to bring people that are outside of our geographic area into expert care by using these telehealth opportunities that have finally come down the pike. And we anticipate, we certainly know that Medicare widened the rule until December, but I anticipate that it's going to be such a success that the widened rules will probably stay in place, maybe a little tighter, a bit tighter. So the only thing that's going to interfere with you getting care that way will be your states. And the big two, California and Illinois, that have the most tight rules for out-of-state caregivers being on your team. So you got to get after your own legislators within your states to try to look at what your state's telehealth rules might be and try to make sure you grab a hold of the COVID bandwagon and get your telehealth state laws widened broadly, and then hope they stick when this emergency state is over. So what I would ask you to do is, first, you got your trainer wheels off. You got the DoD to fund. That was amazing. Go for the big stuff. Next year, this year, any year, get the DoD to give MECFS the set aside. As I said, the DoD way of funding is so exciting because advocates play a role. And the other thing the DoD does is every single year they set their priorities, brand new program announcements every single year, building on last year's new knowledge. And so you're not sitting around, as we have done for 20 years, writing pathogenesis protocols, because that's all we were able to be responding to at the NIH. You can move on to clinical trials. And they have a vigorous trials program. So that space where science translates into care is the space we should be in right now as a group of scientists that have enough knowledge to propose interventions. And I think we can and should be doing that. And then as we're doing that, we can tighten up some of our own methodologic issues. We have some problems like with our primary outcome variables and whatnot. But we can do that just by designing studies that teach us as we our primary goal of getting people better. And then the final mission, the one you all just spoke to, the uneducated, stupid doctors that you have been seeing for the decades. I feel so frustrated myself. I started this, literally with braces on my teeth, and I turned 65 this year. And I'm like, why do these doctors still don't get it? What did we fail to do in the career that I have dedicated to this, to get that message through into training of our providers so that they would stop being idiots? And the bottom line is, the first drug out that some pharmaceutical company can shill, everyone will know this. And the proof to that is what happened with fibromyalgia. I watched a fibromyalgia lecture 2 years before Lyrica got approved, where the guy literally showed slides when we were already in the electronic era doing PowerPoint that he dusted off from 20 years ago that said everyone was crazy, don't let them talk to each other, they're all a bunch of nut bars. And then 2 years later we had Lyrica. The prevalence of fibromyalgia data is 5 to 10-fold higher than what it was before that drug came out. That's just diagnosis. That's doctors knowing how to diagnose a disease. So think about that when we're pushing on. First drug out with an indication sends a huge medical education bunch of dollars out to educate every primary care doctor in the country. It can be done. It's effective. It's quick. And oh my God, then lots of what you've been suffering through just goes away. Any primary care doctor in the country will know what this disease is. So the mission is, yes, understand the disease, absolutely figure out the subgroups so we can be a little more specific in our interventions, and get those translational studies out, move them rapidly to phase 2 studies, find our pharma partner, and get this stuff out there. We have been dedicated to repurposed drugs. We thought it would be faster. I'm not sure it was the best decision, but it was our decision. We thought if the drug already exists, it will be more easy to partner with a new indication. And it's, pipeline drugs actually give those guys 18 years of profits, where repurposed drugs give them like 9 years of profits. So maybe it's been a harder sell. But anyway, we're doing all of that, and we're pushing on. For those of you who don't know us, we're in South Florida, but we're 16 investigators, all different disciplines. We have a clinical care program, education program, and of course our biomarker discovery and translational science stuff that's based on computational modeling. So that's us, and I really hope that you all are successful as you virtually tromp around in your Senate and congressional offices, and that you can get us front and center in next year's budget. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for speaking today, and a special shout out to Emmy Action Florida for helping coordinate with you. That was really helpful. And I know you have a webinar coming up on Friday, Dr. Klimas. Is that open? Is that open to the public, or will it be available later?
I'm sorry that we just last sentence, there was some noise. Try it again.
Oh yeah, no worries. I believe you have a webinar coming up on Friday that I think will be posted.
Right, I was supposed to talk up our webinar, and we're trying to use this virtual time to get more virtual ourselves. So you'll see quite a bit more from us, even if it's an hour or not. Our exercise physiologist is going to start doing some exercise classes online, and I know at least our local support group virtually has just been growing hugely since we made it virtual. So it's kind of exciting. And we're trying new things, and it's working.
That is outstanding. And thank you again, and thank you for that call for advocacy, and also for all of that accessibility, hoping that telemedicine can be expanded and maintained after COVID. So thank you very much. Ashanti, I believe that you're available now. Is that right? Okay, awesome. I just want to introduce you one more time, Ashanti, so everyone knows. Ashanti, I've had the great pleasure of meeting several times in the LA area. She's a former registered nurse, and she has, as she said, was thrust into the world of ME activism following her disabling sudden onset of ME nearly 4 years ago. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ashanti Daniel. As Lori said, a registered nurse who was a picture of health until I was blindsided by myalgic encephalomyelitis, better known as ME, nearly 4 years ago. Unlike some ME warriors who experienced a gradual decline in their health, mine was sudden, like being hit by a train I never saw coming. I worked my last night shift at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center on August 10th, 2016, and sadly was never able to return to my beloved career. Despite being young and healthy at the time, I got sick with the virus, and that was the beginning of the end of life as I knew it before ME. Nevertheless, I consider myself to be one of the lucky ones. What I mean by that is I was lucky enough to get diagnosed only 9 months after the initial onset of my illness, whereas many other ME warriors, especially people of color, are undiagnosed for years. I was lucky enough to be believed by my primary care doctor. I was lucky enough to be a nurse, which in my experience made me more credible to the countless specialists I saw in search of an explanation for my mysterious and unrelenting symptoms. I was lucky enough to only encounter one doctor out of those many specialists who felt the cause of my symptoms was probably, quote, all in my head. My experience should be closer to the norm for ME warriors. Unfortunately, it is rare to come across ME warriors who were diagnosed in less than a year after becoming ill and, most importantly, were believed by clinicians, as that alone is half the uphill battle. Sadly, for people of color, more specifically African American women, the chances of being believed are significantly lower than that of our Caucasian counterparts, regardless of the health concern. Whether it is surrounding Black maternal health or most recently COVID-19, the disparities are staggering. I wish I had time to cite more statistics, but I only have a short time to speak. So real quick, Black women are times more likely than white women to die from pregnancy or childbirth related causes. This trend persists even after adjusting for income and education. Decades of racism and discrimination mean that too often doctors and nurses don't hear Black women's health issues the same way they hear them from other women. The statistics are not final for COVID-19 because obviously the pandemic is still in progress, but I have seen article after article of Black people with COVID-19 being sent home from the hospital and they end up dying as a result. I have even read stories of Black female nurses who were not believed regarding their COVID-19 symptoms and ultimately died at home as a result. One nurse in particular actually had gone to the hospital repeatedly, a hospital where she was a nurse as an employee working through the pandemic, and they still treated her poorly, did not take her serious, and she was never admitted to the hospital and ended up dying at home. For those Black women who survived COVID-19, they have a chance of becoming ill with ME and again, not being taken seriously. This is beyond unacceptable, but unfortunately not surprising. This nightmare illness flipped my world upside down. Nursing, my life's purpose, and who I am at my core is now just a memory. The mother I was pre-illness is no more. The fitness enthusiast I was pre-illness that worked out 4 to 5 days a week doing high-intensity interval training was killed by ME. Not only am I unable to work out, I cannot even walk more than a short distance without becoming extremely short of breath, dizzy, and need to sit down to avoid passing out. I am unable to even shower without my heart racing at 150 to 160 beats per minute while sitting down on my shower chair. A year and a half ago, a portacath had to be placed in my chest. It's now hidden under my shirt. I could go on and on about everything this illness has taken away from me and done to me, but in the interest of time, I won't. I can't. I'm here from my sick bed, literally, to advocate for ME warriors, especially the unlucky ones. The ME warriors who don't get diagnosed for too many years. The ME warriors who are not believed by clinicians. The ME warriors who are not healthcare professionals with, quote, inside knowledge on how to navigate the healthcare industry as a patient. The unlucky ones represent the majority of ME warriors, and we desperately need your help. Many of us are too sick to advocate for ourselves, so we desperately need able-bodied allies to join in this fight for more research funding, more awareness, more education for healthcare professionals, etc. For those of you watching this thinking ME cannot happen to you, it can, and it does, no matter how many degrees you have or how healthy you think you are. We want a chance to get back to our careers or at least some semblance of our old lives. We are the millions missing. Will you help us now?
Thank you so much, Ashanti. It's incredibly inspiring. I know so many people at our last Millions Missing talked about Ashanti because having a nurse experience this as well, having someone that has faced the healthcare system and worked in it. So your story is so powerful, and thank you very much for sharing. Next up, we're going to have Claudia. Claudia, are you on the phone? Are you able to join on the phone?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Claudia Carrera is an intermittent academic, activist, and artist within youth who works on social movements and health justice and academic labor and has volunteering with ME Action since April 2019. And I am here to tell you, in a year, she has added so much to our work. Thank you so much, Claudia.
Thank you. So like several other speakers today, I'd like to talk about the power of our community. So since getting involved in the ME community about a year and a half ago, I've been amazed by the grit and resilience of this community. Because abandoned by society, by medicine, by science, by our own communities, we nonetheless manage to survive day by day, hour by hour, relying on each other because we can rely on no one else. But having to fend for ourselves trains us to doubt that anyone outside our community cares about us and that any change is possible. Because after all, when something doesn't work for 30 years, it's rational to believe that it will never work and to invest your energy elsewhere. So a certain sense of cynicism, of exhaustion beyond our physical exhaustion, but also an emotional exhaustion with hoping and getting disappointed over and over again, I think tends to permeate our community. And understanding that change is hard and doesn't happen quickly can have real benefits. It can keep us from really crashing when we get disappointed, but it also means that we begin to doubt our power as a community. My research and experience before becoming moderately ill and having to leave my PhD program has taught me that disenfranchised communities like us have way more power than we ever think. No matter how bad the circumstances, if we come together through collective action, we can accomplish the impossible. So personally, I've worked in the graduate labor movement, in which graduate workers at universities, who are the lowest employees on the totem pole, have been able to win remarkable new rights and benefits and wage increases across the country through radically democratic social justice movement organizing that takes bold risks to get bold rewards. For my dissertation, I studied the HIV/AIDS activist movement that others on this call have been deeply involved in. And I've been in and around several other campaigns led by disenfranchised groups such as fast food employees, migrant farm laborers, domestic workers, all communities that really started out from a position of absolutely no power against major entrenched powers. So when people hear of success stories from such movements, which have really been happening over the last decade or two, they often think like, well, X was different, or they had Y on their side, or this other factor is why they succeeded, and it's not possible for us. But from my experience, I can tell you that all of these groups start from positions of deep disadvantage and disillusionment. In all of these cases, people have often fought and lost for years. They've often been betrayed by go-betweens who promised to help them and then failed them, and they've completely lost faith that things will ever change. And when they start, it feels as impossible to them that they can achieve their goals as it might seem to many of us now. But all of these groups and many more throughout history have been able to change that through organizing, through shifting people's perspectives in the community, as Omar mentioned, by getting their feet wet in demanding what they deserve. What they imagined might be possible begins to become true. By claiming their power, they begin to exert it, and by exerting it, they begin to believe in it, and by believing in it, then they convince their opponents that they have it, and that makes all the difference. In the last year, I and many other activists have been working to try to create this kind of shift in our relationship with the NIH and the CDC. And so over the fall, we tried to work to bring people together to plan a series of escalating actions, which some of you may have heard of. We did a video campaign and a card writing campaign to Dr. Koroshetz, a petition, and what these have led to over time, on the last NIH call, Koroshetz was sucking up to us, telling us how much he loved our letters and kind of apologizing for the situation that we're in. And Francis Collins, in front of Congress, ended up vowing that he cares about ME/CFS. So by being bold in our goals and working together, and taking risks when necessary, we've been able to start to drive the narrative, to shift it with the NIH and CDC, and to put them on the defensive, where they feel like they need to explain themselves, which they do. And so now during COVID-19, we have a bigger opportunity than ever to take control of the situation and exert the power we have. Right now, we are the ones with the knowledge. We have the numbers. We have the foresight. We know what's going to happen before our leaders do, before the doubting scientists and doctors do. We need to believe in our power, and we need to demand what we deserve. And I really think that society is going to be more receptive to this than ever before, because for the first time, large parts of it's not just that large parts of the population are experiencing self-isolation against their will, they're also missing important life events. They are losing their jobs due to health issues or health fears. They are dealing with a continual sense of uncertainty about what the future holds, just like all of us have to deal with. And also, a lot of them are experiencing or hearing about the kinds of debilitating neuroimmune systems that all of us live with long term. And there's I think all of us have a sense of like we could have never have imagined what it felt like before we felt it. And now there's a lot of people who have felt it, and they will get what it means to say, imagine if that never goes away. So there's going to be this clear, widespread cause and effect process happening in front of everyone's eyes. And while it's likely to affect disenfranchised communities more than others, as we all know happens, it will also hit doctors, it'll hit scientists, politicians, it'll hit the people they know. So we are better set up now than ever to make ourselves heard and to get what we have always deserved, because the crisis will be so clear and so obvious, but we need to be prepared to take advantage of that. We have seen through this pandemic how possible it is for science to happen quickly when the need and the will and the funding is there. And we must push for this coordinated action to continue into post-viral effects. We're better positioned now more than ever to get a major coordinated response from our leaders that could be truly transformative. It could involve medical education, biomedical research, expanded accessibility, the kind of change that will change our lives forever. So now is the time for us to come together and to all pitch in what we can. And of course, we all struggle with exhaustion. And for some of us, all we can do is to do as little as possible, to just get through from one day to the next. And that itself is a form of activism. It's sometimes the most radical form of activism we can take to take care of ourselves and keep ourselves going. And so for some of us, that's the case all of the time. And for all of us, that is the case some of the time. But we are mighty in our numbers and in our spirits and in our power. And we know how to support each other because we've been doing that for decades. So when one of us steps out, another can step in. And we can apply what we've been applying to our community for so long to activism. So this Millions Missing, and I'm going to throw in a little shameful media reference here. Let's become Japanese bees. I think some of you might have heard about these giant hornets, giant Asian hornets, that an invasive species that is invading the West Coast or has appeared on the West Coast. And American honeybees have no defenses, and just a few giant hornets can totally destroy a giant colony of tens of thousands of bees in about an hour. But in Japan, where the honeybees have evolved together with the giant hornets, they've developed this defense where these tiny bees, compared to the giant hornets, mass around them. They fly around them and form this little ball of honeybees that buzzes so hard that it ends up heating the hornet and killing it. And our American honeybees don't know yet that they have that power. And just the way I sometimes feel that our community doesn't know that it has that power. So this Millions Missing, let's take that power. Let's realize the collective power we have, one story at a time, one card at a time, one phone call at a time, one press release at a time. Let's believe that we can solve this. Let's realize that we can solve this, and let's make it happen. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Claudia. Yeah, I agree. Let's make it happen. Next, I would like to introduce a real Southern powerhouse. Terry Wilder. She's a social worker background. She's been a part of the HIV community since 1989. She's been a reporter and writer for the Body website since 2007. She was served on the New York Governor's Task Force to End AIDS, and she's the chapter lead for Emmy Action New York. Terry?
Hey, Lori, thank you. Like Lori said, I'm Terry Wilder, and I'm greeting you from New York City. Today is such an important day for me. It's obviously not only a day to raise awareness about ME and engage in activism, but it's a day that I celebrate the fact that I'm still alive and that I'm still fighting. A little over 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with ME, and to be exact, it was March of 2016. Like most of us, I'm sure I've had this for decades prior to my diagnosis. In March of 2016, it was a time in my life that was filled with extreme illness, fear, and actually in some ways relief that I finally knew what was causing me to feel like I was dying. The first year of my diagnosis was a roller coaster of emotion, trying to figure out what this new information meant to my life and my identity. I was really scared. I was really scared about what was going to happen. And I was actually really scared that if people knew my diagnosis, would they start treating me differently? Thankfully, I was quickly connected with ME Action and was able to plug in with this passionate, brilliant community. I think some of you know that I have a long history as an HIV and LGBTQ activist dating back to 1989. And of course, 1989 was another scary time in the world due to HIV. And it's similar in some ways to what we're experiencing with COVID-19. In 1989, that was a time when people with HIV demanded access to FDA-approved drugs, to comprehensive health care, to research, to recognition, and a world free of stigma and discrimination. And I bring this up because the HIV community really taught me how to fight back, especially against discrimination. And I have been fighting for us since March of 2016, applying everything that I have learned from these very brilliant, sexy, beautiful people in the HIV social movement. So today, when I think about Millions Missing, I'm thinking about all the people around the world who have had their life taken from them. I'm fighting for you, and I'm fighting for me. When we held our protest against Perfink, the evil doctor who has no clue what he's talking about when it comes to ME, when he was invited by Columbia University in New York City, and I organized with many, many other people from other social movements to show up at Columbia to have a demonstration, and ended up having someone get in and interrupt his talk. I was fighting for you. When I call out discrimination and stigma about ME, I'm fighting for you. When I work with elected officials, I'm fighting for you. When I write letters and I make phone calls to people in power, I am fighting for you. When I am begging people to fund and support clinical education, to educate medical providers about ME, I am fighting for you. When I'm calling out misinformation and disinformation about science, I'm fighting for you. When I spoke out on CIFSAC, I am fighting for you. When I met with the NIH and Health and Human Services, I'm fighting for you. When I have had phone calls with the NIH, including with Dr. Tony Fauci, I am fighting for you. When I send emails, sometimes not nice emails, to the NIH, I'm fighting for you. And when I pick up the phone to call you or send you a note just to check in with you, I'm fighting for you. So I want to leave you with a few words from AIDS activist Vito Russo from his famous speech called Why We Fight. His words inspire me, and they remind me why we can never be silent. In the words of AIDS activists, and in particular in ACT UP, Silence equals death, and knowledge equals power. I'm about to read this to you, but I've taken the liberty of changing some of his words so that they can relate to what those of us who are living with HIV, living with ME, and what we're going through can be relevant. I'm sharing this because I truly believe that one day we will defeat ME. And as you're listening to his words, I want you to think about our disease, but I also want you to think about our disease in the context of COVID-19. So these are the words from Why We Fight. Someday, the ME crisis will be over. Remember that. And when that day comes, when that day has come and gone, there will be people alive on this earth, gay people and straight people, men and women, black and white, who will hear the story that once there was a terrible disease in this country and all over the world, and that a brave group of people stood up and fought, and in some cases gave their lives, so that other people might live and be free. So I'm proud to be with my friends today and the people I love, because I think you're all heroes, and I'm glad to be part of this fight. But to borrow a phrase from Michael Callan's song, all we have is love right now, and what we don't have is time. In a lot of ways, ME activists are like those doctors out there. They're so busy putting out fires and taking care of people on respirators that they don't have the time to take care of all the sick people. We're so busy fighting out fires right now that we don't have the time to talk to each other and strategize and plan for the next wave and the next day and the next month and the next week and the next year. And we're going to have to find the time to do that in the next few months. And we have to commit ourselves to doing that. And then after we kick the shit out of this disease, we're all going to have to be alive to kick the shit out of the system so that this never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. And now I want to turn it over to Ben Suberger, who is ME Action's Global Community and Campaigns Director and is a person with ME.
Thanks, Lori. Wow. So we made it. We made it to the end. So if you're watching this video with us, thank you for joining us. I won't repeat a lot of the things that so many other people have said before. They've said it much more eloquently than me. I will just say that whether you are a person like Whitney, and this is your first Millions Missing, or you're a Wilhelmina, and you count your time with ME in decades, not in years, we need you. We use these, my title is Global Community and Campaigns Director, and the community part isn't about flowery language. We throw it around, but that's community is about survival for us. Community is how we win. This is how we win together. The only way we're going to win. So why ME Action exists is to provide a structure and an organizing way to work together to affect change, and that's what we can do together. So those of you who live with the disease know this is Millions Missing is a special day. We're thankful you participate in it, but the disease is our entire lives, not just one day. And so I hope you will come with us on this journey, join us in this fight. And if you are just starting out, we will, now's a great time to join. There will be new trainings and content that can help you figure out how to take those first steps to be an activist, do things you've never done before. You can do them together with us. So reach out to us, join our Facebook groups, subscribe to our newsletter, look out for some of our events that are coming, and it will be a bright future together. I think I'm so proud of all the people that I get the privilege to work with, the volunteers here in the US, as well as the UK, Scotland, and elsewhere. And, I'm so proud of what they accomplished today, so proud of their voices speaking out. And I also think of those of you who, who are part of our journey, who volunteered before and maybe aren't able to now, who built us to this place. So wherever you are in your journey, come join us in this fight. We need you, and we can do this together. This is about community for survival and community for changing our situation. And it's the only way we can do it. We can't wait on some savior, some one person to fix it all for us. But we can come together wherever you are and keep moving forward. And I would say first thing you should join is come have fun. Join our party on Thursday. We're having an icebreaker party. It will be fun. You'll get to know other people. We'll play icebreaker games. And it is a way to get to know, you'll come away from that getting to know several other people, making personal connections. And that's how we build the strength of a movement, is by building the community. So come make friends. Friends are essential for this fight and for this long haul. I am so grateful for the friends that I have in ME Action, and I want more of them. So come join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. I want to thank all of the speakers who spoke today and shared their stories, shared their calls to action. I want to thank all of you who are tuning in. I also want to thank all of the volunteers, the staff who worked so hard. And if you were going to share some of our content today, if you were going to have a call for donations, I would ask that you consider donating to ME Action today. We are a young nonprofit. Just as Jen said, we are marking our 5th anniversary, and we are so, so grateful for what we've been able to achieve. And we know there is so much ahead. We know that we have to continue to educate clinicians. We know that we have to fight the system. We know that we have to do all of our advocacy work. We know that we have to keep sponsoring fellows, and we know that we have to keep getting science and research at the forefront of everyone so that they understand this illness and they understand why it matters to fight. So please consider sharing, giving a donation to ME Action, and most importantly, keep telling your stories. And just as Ben said, please join us on Thursday. It is so important to us to continue to grow this amazing community. You inspire all of us. You make our work so meaningful, and you are the reason we are here. So thank you so much to all of you. Thank you again to the speakers, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.